of the feeling that there was a fresh start with this conversation. I don't doubt that there is a genuine feeling of optimism about the path forward because the Prime Minister has absolutely changed his tone. What I noticed too is that all of those premiers are expressing their optimism regarding the ability of the Prime Minister to deliver on what he's promised. They have set things up in their tone and their messaging today such that if this fails to materialize, it falls at the feet of one person, and that's the Prime Minister. So I think they're being very careful and strategic in the way they're talking today, but they're also taking an opportunity that's in front of them. For many of these provinces, including Saskatchewan, they have, excuse me, they have felt hamstrung by federal policies for the last number of years. You saw genuine optimism, I think, in the tone of voice of Scott Moe and Danielle Smith, as well as other premiers, about the ability to perhaps bring new investment into their jurisdictions, and that's good news.
Right. So Rob Benzie has been hooked up to the grid here. Benzie, you look at the positivity at the end of that press conference. We've met at a few of these over the years, and it's not often this together. And you look at it and it's like, boy, if this stays, they can really do a lot of stuff together. Or it can only go down from here, right? I mean, how do you view where things are at the end of this day?
Well, I mean, I think if the Prime Minister hadn't told you last week, David, that there would be a list of specifics and we would, see a path forward, I think there would be a lot more euphoria here. I mean, I think there is certainly a honeymoon period that the Prime Minister is enjoying. I think the premiers, are by and large very positive, considering how we've seen this country divided before. I think it's not insignificant that the Premier of Alberta was as happy as she was, because as she said, she's been at these meetings many times. People don't talk about pipelines. People don't talk about
it's in the communique.
Yeah,
oil and gas pipeline.
Yeah, that is huge. Premier Doug Ford in Ontario was also very, very happy. Obviously, he's a more ebullient, demonstrative guy, but I think his Santa Claus image is not inaccurate, in the sense that a lot of people have their hopes and dreams tied to Prime Minister Mark Carney, and I think his success will depend on whether he can deliver on some of these.
He didn't give us the specific projects that I think you and I are both expecting, Rob, but we did see, and this is not in the communique sort of thing, this is what he added, the Western and Arctic Economic Corridor, right? The Eastern Energy Partnership, the Critical Minerals Pathway, the next stage of nuclear, infrastructure for trade diversification, ports, rail, and road. He gave the Jeopardy categories that you can see very specific projects fitting into. So there's directional signals there, if not the specifics, I think a lot of people were hoping to see today.
But there were directional signals in the campaign as well.
Yeah, that's very true. And specifics.
And specifics. And I think that's that's where the rubber will hit the road. I think there is a lot of goodwill toward this new Prime Minister. It does feel like there's been a change in government. That is not just a vibe. You can sense it here from the way the premiers of all political stripes are acting. So I think that's interesting. But again, let's see what happens after Canada Day. This legislation's coming forward. Obviously, interprovincial trade barriers are coming down pretty rapidly. I think that's the thing. Having covered numerous Council of the Federation and FMMs over the years, I'm really impressed that there actually does seem to be, what Carney talked about this morning, momentum.
Right. So Amanda, there is momentum. Whether they hit the July 1 deadline the Prime Minister set seems unlikely at this point, but moving on the path that he wanted. But, the giving the directional signals today as opposed to the specific signals, is that going to be a disappointment, or is this reassuring enough to people out there sitting on capital looking to invest that maybe it's worth it to try to get things done?
I don't think at this point any company sitting on capital is saying, yeah, I'm going to get in with both feet. I think their ears are perked up, right? I think they think there's opportunity there. But, we've been the last decade, frankly, creating legislation to bar a lot of resource companies from investing in that. The write-offs for TMX alone was $9 billion or something of that quantum. So I think that people are encouraged, but I would suspect they're going to need to have much more specifics come out of this government. The other thing I would caution and say is, yes, I agree totally with Rob in that there's certainly the feel of a new government around how Prime Minister Carney operates, but it's still a very similar front bench to the last government. And Prime Minister Carney cannot be everywhere and he cannot be all things. So at the end of the day, those are going to get pushed out to his ministers. Is those the same ministers? Are those the same staff? Like, how is that going to work? Because we know how the government operates. He cannot be everywhere. So how this works going forward, other than I think a very capable energy minister, is going to be an interesting challenge to watch.
Right. I mean, I take Amanda's point, Carleen, that there are some familiar faces, but I think the marching orders they're getting and the expectations they're getting with them are different. That's sure the impression I'm getting, and some of the cabinet ministers have expressed. So what needs to happen next, right, to move past the skepticism? Because, if you're a Western Canadian and a Western Canadian premier or anyone in the energy sector, there's not a lot of trust here. And even Danielle Smith, as encouraged as she was reserved on it as well. Cautiously pessimistic, I want to say, maybe. So what do they need to do now? I know the legislation is going to come, but demonstrably, what do you think the next step is for this government?
The legislation has to be tabled, and Mark Carney has to show exactly how he proposes to fast-track approvals for projects that are in the national interest. If you are an institutional investor sitting on that capital thinking about considering perhaps investing in a project in Canada, you know very well the parameters of what Canada's legal and constitutional requirements are. The Impact Assessment Agency, which is the body that was set up by that Bill C-69 that is the target of so much venom, it isn't there just for fun. It is there as a vehicle to enable projects to be, ensure that they do fulfill those legal and constitutional requirements. So we need to know exactly what is different about the new plan that's going to be put forward that will enable things to move faster than they're currently moving. Now, Mark Carney's a smart guy. He's certainly a guy who understands international markets, so I don't expect that he wrote this plan on the back of a napkin. But Canadians do need to see specifics. I think premiers, businesses, and the workers who are actually going to be able to count on hopefully a lot of really good, well-paying jobs from these projects are going to need to see the details to show that there's actually a way forward here and to get it moving fast.
What I find interesting, Rob, even before here, going out to Calgary, right? And Tim Hodgson, the new energy minister, went out there and gave a speech that was really well received by that economic sector. He wants to meet directly with the CEOs, which I find interesting, right? It's not about a consultation with stakeholder groups. Yeah. It's the people who sit, and go to the board and say, I want to invest this capital on this project, a bit like he's doing with the premiers, the CEOs of the provinces. What do you make of that approach? That is not something we've seen a lot of from the Liberal government for the past 8 or 9 years.
No, I mean, Doug Ford's folks were saying to us they can't remember someone so fixated on business and the economy in that chair. It is a different, Danielle Smith spoke about the tone. It's also a different tenor of government. It's just, I think that Mr. Carney will be a lot more, I think he's going to be a lot harder on his ministers, frankly. I think the ministers who mess up are not going to be around long. I think he's going to be like the CEO, and if the VP of sales is not doing a great job, boom, the VP of sales is gone. If the VP of marketing, if the VP of operations, if those things are all important. I know government is not a business, but I think there really is because Canada has this existential threat from Donald Trump, there is a moment here that this country can kind of come together in a way that really hasn't done, even in our lifetime, David. You'd have to go back almost to the 1960s, that sort of a go-go type of time when there was a feeling of optimism in the country that I think. I've been at a lot of these meetings. I haven't seen that much love in a room in a long time. This is a different vibe, and and I think. It's not that everyone is suddenly a federal liberal. I don't think that's it at all. I think there is, though, in Mr. Carney, someone who has achieved things in other walks of life, at the Bank of Canada, Bank of England. Right. That's impressive to these folks. Yeah, so,
Amanda, it's always dangerous to talk about vibes, right? Christopher Freeland got in trouble for talking about a vibe session. Now this is like vibe investment. I don't know what the word would be. But, with a prime minister who is intent on meeting with CEOs and trying to get them on board with the plans and then sort of doing this. To go back to your point about the familiar faces in the front bench, what do you want to see here to sort of push through the skepticism that you raised there about whether the old team can truly deliver the new agenda?
I think, the proof will be in the pudding over the next few weeks. It's what Carly mentioned, what's in the legislation. What is that path forward? I find it deeply encouraging that the Prime Minister is meeting with CEOs. I think that's absolutely the smart thing to do as opposed to just associations and stakeholders, which was spent way too much time with the previous government, right? I think that is absolutely the right thing to do. Are they going to be serious? Are they going to repeal the tanker legislation or push that forward? Is he going to use, I think he's got a ton of political capital right now. Is he going to use that not just to say nice things to these premiers, but muscle them around to make sure that they do fall in line and support things? Like there is the moment happening in this country, and hopefully he can bring that together. But part of that also means doing stuff that might be politically unpopular with members of his base to get these projects moving. And I hope he does that and spells it out very clearly, because if private sector is not going to step up, the government may have to get into the business of building pipelines again. And that may be the best thing for the country, but it'll be interesting to see how he moves that forward.
I didn't get the sense, Carleen, from Daniel Smith there's any appetite in Alberta for TMX Take 2. Certainly don't get that impression from Mark Carney. But, the stakeholders that he has to deal with, like the various parts of his voter coalition that Amanda talked about there, he needs to manage his caucus, he needs to manage his cabinet table, and he needs to work this First Minister's table so it can be an effective forum. One is your assessment, a little over a month since the election, which is remarkable considering all the different things that have happened in the last month, of where he is on that path right now.
He is taking a step forward each and every day along that path with a certainty that I think is remarkable. We haven't yet seen this man flinch effectively since the day that he took over as leader of the Liberal Party and then as Prime Minister of the country a few days later. He has walked forward with a certainty in his intention, in the way that he wanted to campaign during a campaign, during the election, the way that he wanted to assemble a cabinet, the way that he intends to govern through the delivery of the throne speech last week. I expect to see that continue. What will be interesting is how long he maintains the goodwill of the country in doing that. I think we are still in the period where there is a lot of goodwill from Canadians, an opening to move forward. They're willing to give this guy the benefit of the doubt. And you heard the premiers talk about that today too, right? That there was a momentum in the room, and that momentum didn't just come from each premier being willing to work with the others around the table. It came from the Canadian public itself that is united by this common threat that we're facing. So I think that's sort of the operative question is how much goodwill does Carney have to work with? If he continues to build it up rather than burn it, I think he'll be solid for a long time. But things will get hard when it comes time for decisions to actually be made. And you made this point a few minutes ago, David. Right. Eventually, some people are going to get a yes, some people are going to get a no, and that's when politics comes into play, and that can be the hard part.
Yeah, that's the moment I'm certainly watching for. But, Benzie, we got about 60 seconds left, so I'll give it to you. What political capital Mark Carney has, he has a pretty clear idea of what kind of prime minister he wants to be. He seems intent on spending it and pushing every lever of power he has to move as fast as he can, at least to this point. Yeah,
I agree, and I think Carleen's right that he has this valuable capital. Does he squander it? I don't know. I don't get the sense from him that this is a guy who's been thinking about this, David, for a very long time. He is not a newcomer to politics or affairs of state. That being said, I think there is something about him that that I sense from some of the premiers, that he exudes confidence, and that confidence is almost infectious. It's just a weird kind of a sense that you get, that there's a sense of possibility. I know there's going to be disappointment along the way, and not everyone's going to get what they want, but I think there is a sense right now everyone wants to give him a chance from across the political spectrum, and he might just surprise us. And good job. I don't know.
You can see over time with leaders, they can become prisoners of the complexity, or they can navigate it. In the early stages of it, he seems intent on navigating it. Well, look, thank you three for navigating this with me. It's been a busy day. We're like loading and going premiers here, like an overdue ferry. I want to say goodbye to the Power Rankings panel: Carleen Verheyen, Amanda Galbraith, and Rob Benzie. All right, I am David Cochrane. Thank you all for watching this special edition of Power and Politics, coming to you from the First Minister's meeting here in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. Hannah Mansing tonight is up next on CBC News Network. I'll be back in Ottawa tomorrow. We'll see you in about 22 hours with the next edition of the show. Thanks for watching, everybody.